when I did this first interview with Jarrod Kilway, who's the Vice President of Digital Operations at the Casa Auto Group, and I want you to, I know that sometimes doesn't roll right off the tip of your tongue. It's the VP of Digital Operations at the Casa Auto Group. Incredibly forward-leaning, forward-thinking organization, and Jarrod is really central to that, because this guy, the way he thinks, the way he frames things, and how he helps this organization is truly unique. So the first time I had the opportunity to speak with Jarrod, we covered a myriad of subjects, and I was fascinated through the entire conversation. And, you know, everybody that listened to that podcast episode either hit me directly, many people hit me directly, or had people hit me through LinkedIn, and they really loved and were equally fascinated by the conversation. So I thought, doggone it, my mom always told me, if you start something, you finish something. And so today, well, Mom, if you're listening, I'm not promising we're going to finish it, because it may take a third episode. I don't know. But I want to welcome Jarrod back to the show. Jarrod Kilway, welcome back to the David Spisak Show. Thanks for joining the podcast once again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Had a blast, as you said. Yes, it was very insightful last time, and excited to kind of elaborate more and talk through what 2025 is, because that's kind of the big question mark I see for a lot of stores going into December. We already know December's off and kicking, but what's 2025 going to be? So thanks for having me back.
Well, of course. And I'm sure I look forward to having you back again in 2025, when we could kind of look out the rearview mirror, play Monday morning quarterback, and kind of see how things are starting to play out by the time we get even halfway through the first quarter, Q1, no football pun intended. So, Jarrod, a couple things. So, you know, just a few weeks ago, as you know, we had our Disruptive Forces in Retail Automotive Used Car virtual event, and you were on one of those panels, and that in and of itself was an interesting conversation, and also spurred this happening, this sequel, if you will, to your original podcast episode. So there's a couple things I want to first not assume that everybody who listens to this listened to the first one. And so I want to kind of rewind the tape a little bit. And as I mentioned, Jarrod is the Vice President of Digital Operations. And for those of you who've never heard of that position, and I would venture to say that's most people in retail automotive, and certainly most people outside of retail automotive. So for the sake of catching everybody up, let's start there. Share with everybody exactly what do you do in virtual operations. I know you touch on marketing and process tech, but exactly what does your position entail? What does it mean for the team at Casa Auto Group and for their clients?
No, so I love it as well. It's definitely a role that I think the industry needs to evolve into, because we have such segmentation within the groups. You have a marketing director, you have GMs, you have your corporate team, you have your COO, CFO role, but you don't have anybody who's really trying to understand the tech stack that the dealership is operating with, making sure all the pillars that they have, from service to BDC to sales and CRM and all their tools to inventory management tools, making sure all of those tools collectively not only work together to benefit the store, but also a process is derived of what this tool is going to do and how we're going to use a piece of tech to solve this problem. How do we draw that line from a process and people perspective? How do we get those two to connect? And at the end of the day, it's working with GMs, adding new tech, to be able to function in those ways. But that's just part of it. It's also down to the coaching and mentorship of, specific people in roles of BDC and e-com, because I feel, and I know we've talked about in the past, that's still a really, really big opportunity, whereas a lot of dealers continue to struggle with, purely because of bandwidth on how to measure and how to hold accountability to expectations. So it's kind of helping step in and being that big brother type and giving feedback. But that ties back into the tech origination as well. So I'm involved with anything and everything touching a computer, a phone, marketing, tech, process, and people. Some way, shape, or form, I'm touching
What do you
all
do
of
in your
that
free
to make
time?
the beauty of AI. I can have myself be in multiple places at the same time.
I love it. I love it. All right. I got to jump on a couple of these. So you mentioned BDC Ecom. You know, I posted a number of months ago about the fact that I'm equally horrified and amused at the reality that we've had CRMs in some form or fashion for the better part of 3 decades. And 3 decades ago, we were selling 10 cars a month per person. Now we're selling 10 cars a month per person. Now, one could deduce or draw the conclusion from that while CRM's main purpose in life was to help us do a better job of dealing with our customers, nurturing relationships. In fact, CRM, customer relationship management, kind of leads you to believe it's going to do exactly that. And that in turn is going to help us sell more cars. But the reality is we've learned a hard lesson. Tech by itself can't get you there, right? Tech is not ever a just add water solution. Not yet. We don't see that in tech solutions. It takes people, it takes process, it takes training, development, and so forth. So, we've seen just an unimaginable amount of what would you say, just technology solutions and products come into the market in the last 10 years.
Just bolt-ons. A lot of bolt-ons.
But many of them are, and I want to touch on that. Many of those are bolt-ons. Many of them, because, Tekion, obviously, which I know you use, Tekion, when you have a fully integrated platform, ground up, mobile-based, cloud-based, different deal, right? When you don't, and there's other solutions out there that seem to work very well for some people, but when you do that, you're relegated to having bolt-ons. Now, a bolt-on, the first bolt-on may work brilliantly. The third and fourth may work fine. All of a sudden, don't you think we're at a tipping point that by the time you have 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15 or more third-party solutions on that data processing line of your financial statement and another 5, 6, 8, 10 or more virtual auctions, haven't we gotten, Jarrod, to a tipping point which really, A, necessitates somebody in your position, and B, would make me take a very hard look at the epicenter of my tech stack, right, which is my DMS itself.
No, 100%, 100%. And I look at this as your DMS and a well-executed process of CRM. Think of this as your big 16-inch bolt, and then you're screwing all the different nuts onto it. The problem lies is when one of those nuts fails, you have to remove all of them to fix the problem. Or if one of those, nuts, for example, you want to get rid of it, you have to go unscrew all of those in order to go back and put just remove one. So it's how you've intertwined and how you built this. Has it been clearly documented? Because I have them all documented in terms of, and I'm sure you've seen it with Brian Kramer, our inventory mapping of where it was, where the inventory enters the DMS here, then goes to here, then goes to the different points throughout that journey. Just like customer journey, we have a vehicle journey, we have a data journey inside of the dealership. Now, I have that all mapped so that if I have somebody call and say, hey, Carfax is broken, I can't pull Carfax and Viato, okay, I know where to go in terms of my map flow to go fix and resolve that situation. And that's another part of my job and my role with Casa is I would rather have them just call me because I can fix it a lot faster and I can identify that and get it solved and let them do their job as a sales manager or BDC manager who traditionally fixing third-party issues and on the phone eating up tons of time and hours that they could be taking care of customers.
Jarrod,
that's my fit. Take care of people. I'll take care of the tech.
I love that. And this just makes me think of a lot of things. I still visit stores. I still spend time in stores. I do it because I want to. People will say, hey, why do you keep doing that? I don't know. I love to. I love dealerships. I love the car business. I love the energy. I still love to, if I could go out on a showroom floor, and talk to a client or take a management term, I'm all in. Like, I love to do that. I love all of that. But one of the things I find interesting is to this day, 2024, nearly 2025, I'd venture to say 80-90% of the stores I walk into, if I just walk in and I'm unannounced, I can walk into the majority of those sales offices and I can easily get onto their computer. They're open. They don't have an automatic lockdown screensaver. Most of them have them open. Many people have not changed passwords in, forget about 90 days. They haven't changed them in probably 90 months. Let's be honest. I can go into a desking office. I've seen F&I offices where the doors are wide open, right? So even though we've got FTC compliances weighing down more and more and more, I think at times it's completely overwhelming. The tech side of things is completely overwhelming. And I would really struggle to think of, I mean, outside of Publix and the major privates where they really have massive infrastructure and they are big on process. But in terms of the typical dealerships out there, I can't even imagine them possibly even having any kind of a documentation roadmap like you just described. Second thing is, you mentioned BDCs earlier. And, you know, the only reason, as you know, BDCs exist is because at some point somebody couldn't get a salesperson to do what a salesperson's supposed to do. Hey, why don't you call that lead? Why don't you call them back? Why don't you follow up? Why don't you call back the person that bought cars from you a month or 3 months ago so you can nurture a relationship? And they're not doing it. And so somebody said, well, what if we create a department, hire a bunch of people, add some costs, and we'll get somebody else to do what these guys are supposed to do? And that's what happened. Some people do it internally. As you know, Jarrod, some people pay externally. Now, job one is to get it done. So trust me, I'm all in. If you need to have an external or internal BDC, do what you got to do, because it beats the alternative of not getting that done, because that's going to cost you more money than you can imagine. But, you know, as we stand here now, we're nearly in 2025. I mean, what's it going to take, do you think, as we talk about this tipping point with the tech stack, and you talk about the bolt, you know, that big, I think of like the Bay Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge, these massive bolts on the bottom. Those things give away, you got a problem. But there's also a billion rivets, as you mentioned, and any one of which can be problematic. Well, the big bolt is the DMS. And one of the challenges that dealers, I think, are facing, and I'd be curious to get your take. I mean, at some point, you keep lobbing more and more and more solutions onto that foundational element. It has to be able to handle those effectively. And what I see happening, Jarrod, is a proliferation of data from individual data silos that don't talk this way. They're all like this, vertically up and down, and you don't have that data integration. And so at times, because each one proliferates both data and creates its own process for its own sake, have we truly gotten to that point in 2025 as we look forward to where we really need to start looking for a viable long-term solution?
100%. And we have to.
What does that look like?
We have to stop and rewind the tape, you know, and we have to understand as an industry what is truly important. What does success look like? Is it just hitting an objective and hitting market share every single month? Or is it building a clean data piece to be able to operate it from? You know, what is more important? What is the focus? Is it a group initiative? Is it a store initiative? Is it a individual team initiative inside of a store? I mean, it silos down from, you know, those components. So when a GM asks me, it's like, hey, we're going to run this. This is our plan for next month. Like our Kia store, they're going to sell 200 new Kias in the month of December. Great. What's going to be what's the plan to it? What's the budget that you have allocated to it? Perfect. I sit there and write out a business plan, no different than you used to do with reverse risk. We write a business plan off of this budget. This is what's needed to happen. This is how many additional lead opportunities I need to acquire based upon these KPI metrics and our historical annual averages of e-com data. This is how many more leads I need to generate because it's going to get me this many more sales, this many more phone ups, this many more walk-ins, so on and so forth. So I reverse engineer the budget to the data to tell them, hey, you want to do that, you only want to spend 25 grand more. That's going to get you to 160. You need to go spend 70 grand if you want to get to 200, purely looking at the data. But I think we don't, as an industry, we don't have clean data. because we allow mediocrity of the data input into CRM, into even DMSs. I mean, when's the last time you went into a store, David, for service and somebody asked you what your email is? And I have a copy of 2 of them. You get your RO after the end of your service visit, an email line that says no email at gmail.com. Like, how in 2025 are we tolerating that? Yeah. Like, it's such a simple thing. You go to the Apple store to check in to get something down on your phone. The first question they ask you before they ask your name, what's your email address? How are we allowing this and not enforcing?
Don't you find it
basics?
Fascinating? Don't you find it fascinating that you could stand at the counter at any store? I mean, name any store in America. Literally, the person behind the counters, could have started their job 4 days ago, man. Got minimal training, is getting paid probably minimum wage, whatever that might be in that area. I don't know what it is, $13, $15, $18 an hour, whatever it is today. And that person in alignment with that tech is going to get an email. It's going to capture an email 80, 90% of the time or more. Meanwhile, we got people that are making 60, 80, 90, 100 grand or more, and we can't even get that handled. So it begs another question, and that is, again, I'll go back, tech is not a just add water proposition. We do a lot of things great in this industry, and you got to give dealers, I know you agree with me, when it comes to being relentless, persistent, tenacious, resilient, I don't know that there's a better business person on earth than a car dealer. I really don't. I mean, I think they stand alone.
Oh, 100%.
But when it comes to being able to effectively spot talent, find talent, recruit talent, do a great interview process, hire the right person, and develop and keep that person, I think we're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum there, don't you think? And so depending on the team that you have in each store, it's going to dictate, obviously, you're either going to put more weight and pressure on the tech to make up for what your team's going to do. That's my fear for AI, is that AI should help improve processes and workflows. It's not to replace a human that doesn't do their job, for God's sakes. So, don't you think we're at a point to where we need to be also addressing the elephant in the room, which is just, don't we got to get better at getting the right people in the building and training them, developing them, putting them on a path, and then being able to actually retain them so we can get some traction in association with some of this technology that can really help you get to the next level?
Absolutely. And it starts with realizing that a tech bolt-on, and I'll use a video service MPI, for example, it's an incredible piece of tech that can tremendously, grow your fixed ops business, but it's not an easy bake oven. How many of you have, if we've done it and you've done it effectively, what is your percent? Are we measuring what percentages of your MPIs are going out with a video from the technician about what is needed?
And because the quality of that video.
Now, have we trained them? Have we trained them how to do it? Have we provided them the tools that they need to do it? Are we literally inspecting what we expect? And is there a reward behind it? Do they see the vision? Does it trickle down from the owner's vision of what this is going to do versus the GM versus the service director down to the advisor and down to the technician? Is that pathway of that vision drawn clear so that everybody has the understanding of that expectations? But also, we're measuring that every single day. And we are, to your point earlier, we are growing that technician. We are having those conversations with them and teaching them the why this is so critical, of showing them data, just like you did at Used Car Palooza. Auction vehicle, acquired vehicle, what that value difference for profitability is, using that same analogy, but using it in this piece of tech. And showing that to that technician, showing that to that advisor, that if you do this, your hours that you're going to get on average per row goes up 1.4 hours, and you're going to sell this many more hours and parts, Mr. Advisor, and Mr. Service Director, you do this on an average. This is this much more profitability for this department. And Mr. GM, this is your more profitability as a store. everybody's paycheck goes up. But if that line from top all the way down to that end user has to be crystal clear, but that end user needs to be supported by everybody above them to understand the why, the how, and is properly set up with the right tools to be effective with it. And we need that coach's scoreboard. One of my favorite things, we have to have a coach's scoreboard for that. But that's just one piece of tech. And with NADA coming, it's the scary thing for a lot of people is going to just buying this tech, this tech, this tech, this tech, but you haven't derived out that whole process plan yet for everybody to understand why this tech, what it's going to do, what are the different pieces to it, and how this is going to help us grow not only customer CSI, but also effectiveness and what our end goal is to do, which is take care of customers, service and sell vehicles, and make profit.
Yeah, there's so much to grab onto, because I want to make sure we're as efficient with your time as possible and be able to provide everybody listening with the greatest amount of value. Let's do this. You mentioned 2025. We've mentioned the tech, and we've mentioned the tipping point that's happening with respect to the tech stack. So speaking of 2025, we're not even there yet. And there's already headlines. In fact, I'm going to just rewind for a second. I always tell my tech clients that, especially early on, I know that the tendency is to want to go out and just sign clients, right? And I say that's not the right thing to do. You really need to you need to be able to prove you could be a great partner to any dealer client, but you also need dealer clients who could prove they're great partners as well, or I could tell you something's not going to go as well as you want it to go. Second thing, and the reason why that's important, is I really don't want clients. I want headlines, right? And I don't want adoption to my product. I want addiction to my product. And I understand I'm using addiction in a positive way. Well, you could be addicted to love. That's fine, right? You could be addicted to your kids and taking care of them. That's fine. So you want clients that are addicted to your product. In other words, it's freaking oxygen. They need it to be able to get to where they want to go. When you do that, when you get to that point, as you know, Jarrod, magic happened. You really just start to see growth explode. I remember with Techion, I told him a number of years ago, and I've been fortunate enough to be working with that brilliant team, Jay Vijayan and Guru and the rest of that brilliant team, Padram, and just so many good people over there that are dedicated and passionate like we are to making this industry better. And I said, you know what? There's always a point where you start out selling, and then there is a tipping point there to where people start to say, ooh, I may not be ready a year ago for considering another DMS, especially a new one like Techion. But a year or 2 years later, they're saying, I guarantee you I'm not ready to compete against other dealers in my market that have Techion, and I'm sitting on an old archaic system and I can't compete. So all of a sudden, understandably, their client count is just, I don't even know what the number. It's gone up by 5 or 6 times, I think, in the last 2 years. And no reason for me to suspect it's going to ever slow down because they're building into the future. So 2025, the future, is a few weeks away, and already there's a couple major headlines. Number one, Nissan said, we're not going to build as many cars next year. Now, they've said, I believe, that they're going to reduce production by 17%. Stellantis said something similar, different number. And then Tavares finally stepped down. That's only, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years late by most Stellantis dealers' count. But those are two pretty big headlines before we even see January 1st. We don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in January in 2025 total, but I can tell you this. I don't see any reason to believe that it's not going to become more challenging for new car dealers, for the new car side of the business, simply because nobody's solving affordability. And we can do whatever we want, gyrations at the OEM level or programs or anything else. But until we can make cars affordable, like they were in 2019 at 3% and $34,000 as a net purchase price, and of course we had lower gas prices, lower insurance to boot, I don't know if anything that we throw at the kitchen sink is going to solve the problem. I do like, as a first step, the commitment, at least by some, to stop overproducing. But I think by the very nature that you already have some OEMs talking about reducing production, which I've never heard of in my 45 years in this business. They're always talking about more.
Yes.
That to me says a lot of people who are getting paid a lot of money, who have a lot of math degrees, have figured out that that's not a good bet to overproduce in 2025. So
there's a
I
lot.
want you
Yeah,
to kind of jump into your crystal ball and tell me, as you think about that situation with Stellantis, Nissan, and there are others, and some of these moves we're seeing already. Of course, we have the Trump administration coming in, which I think is generally a really good thing. I think it should help on a number of levels. But again, I don't think it addresses the affordability issue. What's your general outlook on 2025, and what do you make of some of these early headlines?
It's 2025 is going to be an interesting year, is what I'm looking at. I have been really trying to study the trend data from all the different OEMs, shareholder calls, etc. And you mentioned affordability, and you mentioned what the consumer sentiment is. We're not looking into who our audiences are right now. And I think that's the take the step back away moment for me. And as you know, I have 4 daughters, and I have one of them that will be driving soon. And I always pick their brain. One question, always ask your kids, hey, if you could go buy any car for your first car, what would it be? I mean, I love that question because my grandfather asked me that when I was probably 10, 12 years old. And I always wanted the 69 Chevelle Super Sport, right? I always wanted the fun car. If you go ask the 10 to 18 generation right now, what car would they go buy for the first car? What do you think they would say?
My guess, and being that their young, fertile minds may not be completely developed, my guess is they're going to go for whatever has the greatest level of technology and connectivity. They're going to be looking for a mobile phone on wheels, right?
So a Tesla is what you're saying.
Yes. So I wasn't going to say the 4-letter, 5-letter word, but it's going to be. It is and it's somebody asked me yesterday, hey, I've got a few $100,000 to put in some stocks. Where would you put it? And I said, well, I'll tell you where I put it. I said, if I'm looking 10 years out, I'm looking at Amazon, I'm looking at Costco, I'm looking at Nvidia, and I'm looking at Tesla. I've got others as well, but I think that is the direction where we're going, and I think that kids, we got to give them more credit sometimes than it seems like we should, but based on their experience. But I think their instincts oftentimes are very interesting, and oftentimes
they're influencing the car buying decision now because they are educating the parents on things that we had no idea about that is out there because of the social media platforms that are there. That's where they have lived. Tesla's won. They've won on social. They've won on TikTok. They've won on these different channels, and they're reaching this next demographic. That's where they live and breathe day in, day out. So that's where they're leaning towards. So it makes sense that Stellantis and Nissan are backing down production and starting to lean in to figure out what's that next step. But I think everybody's sitting there pondering, how do I get into this new upcoming market that's going to be coming here in the next 5 years? That's going to also help influence this next vehicle purchase based upon parents knowing it could be their kid's first car. I'll buy it now, drive it for 2 years, and this is what I'm going to give to my daughter here in 2.5 years when she turns 16. They're influencing these decisions as earlier now than they did before. So it's really interesting, but it's something I've really studied. But this next demographic, they're highly influenced by the social channels, and Tesla's done a great job with it. So now it comes down to the question, though.
I want to add, keep going, and I want to add another layer to that.
So now we have to sit back and rewind the tape of where can we increase market share and really prevent deflection to some of these. And it's really the education and reach to not only that generation, but it's educating the generation from 20 to 50 of all the new technology of, hey, the Explorer, it's, every time you hear Explorer, I know I hear Explorer, I rewind the tape back to the day of the Firestone tires, because that's just what I was always ingrained in your memory. But they have a great level of tech. I drove one when I was in El Paso. It's a great driving car. It performs amazing. I was really impressed with it. But it's not being communicated out there to the audience and to the network and the consumers of, here's all the really cool tech, here's all the amazing safety features. And hey, if you're a soccer mom with 2 kids, this could be the perfect car for you. And where I see some of these OEMs making a play back in is they're going to have to go hyper aggressive on leases for 2025.
100%. I buy into that 100%. And again, because of affordability, it's really the only legitimate way that you can fix this affordability issue. Because I was showing some dealers over the last month that, everybody keeps talking about interest rate, Jarrod. Wow, the interest rates are too high. And I go, well, I think you may be overlooking a really important factor, and that's the price of the car. Because, if you take a car that has an average purchase price now, let's call it $48,500, and you take that $48,500 and you put $5,000 down, which, I don't know, 20% of the country has, right? Only 40% of the country can handle an $1,100 emergency, according to the latest data. But let's just say they put $5,000 down. And let's say that they have a decent credit. Let's say they're at 7% interest rate, right about now. And you fold tax and license into the payment, which most people do. And you're going to have about $850, $900 payment. Okay, well, if you drop that down to 3.9, it doesn't fix the problem. You still have a payment in the 700s. If you drop down to 1.9, you still have a problem. It's still $200 than it was 5 years ago. So there is no way through interest rate, even through subsidized rates, to fix that problem. I think leasing is going to be the key. I'll tell you the other thing, and you see this all the time. The average loan payment that's out there, the term is now up to, I believe, 67 months. Well, how is a 67-month term good for us on retention? If we got to wait 5.5 years, let's face it, you got a 72-month term. It's 5 years before you can extricate yourself out of that car most of the time, unless there's some big program. So we're not an industry that has built ourselves at this point to waiting 5 years for people to flip. That's like, can you imagine people only flipping their iPhones every 5 years? Apple would be a different company. They
Absolutely.
wouldn't be worth the trillions of dollars they're worth today. So, trade cycle management doesn't really work the same way in that particular scenario. So it's interesting, because leasing, obviously, you could pump up the residual, especially when you're getting dealers to buy at least a certain number of those cars off lease. You could subsidize the money factor pretty low, down to sub 1%, and you could really help to synthetically create affordability where it doesn't exist otherwise.
But there's still a really big problem around this, though. Because we could subsidize it, we could have the best residual in the world. How many of our dealership staff today, sales people, managers, and finance, have a clear understanding of what a lease is, how to sell a lease, and more importantly, how to explain to consumer the benefits of it? That's a fair point. That's the education piece to it. I love it, and I think the OEMs are going to do that. But the OEMs are going to have to support, like Stellantis did when it was back in Chrysler, and they used to come and do the Better Way training. You remember the Better Way training for leasing? Yeah. That was great, but that's what it took for them to really bring leasing back into CDJR back in 2005, 2006. It really helped them come back into the leasing game.
I don't know if I agree with you. The whole different subject is just training and developing our sales team, because let's face it, for 3 years, they were trained, developed, conditioned by a market, right? They actually believed themselves. They really believed, some of them in their heart, that somehow they got awesome overnight and went from making, $3,000 a month to 25 grand a month, and going out and buying boats and jet skis and a condo and new cars. That wasn't even the car they were probably selling. But now they're getting slammed back down to earth as the universe tends to do. And it turns out, they're ill-equipped, many of them, to handle this massive change we're seeing in the sales environment. So I agree with you. We always need training and development. The one hesitation I have, I don't think it's going to be as hard this time, because before, when you had half a car, for example, and some of those other programs, you were going up against low interest rates, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, let's think about this. In 1984, the average subcompact was around $8,000. Small car was $9,500. An intermediate mid-sized car was $10,500, which, by the way, has gone up 460% since 1984. 460%. Now, the average household income, Jarrod, has gone up a whopping 37% in the very same period of time, from $58,930, I believe the number was, to $80,600 and change, $80,610 or something. So could you imagine, our incomes, average household has gone up by 37%, and the average car has gone up by, what is that, 11, 12 times that? So the only thing that really spurred those big sales, those numbers, when we went up to from 13 to 15 to 17.5 million, we weren't even selling cars. We were selling deals, weren't we? We were selling low leases. Today, I don't know if you even have to convince me on why leasing is good for me, because you just showed me my payment on the minivan is going to be $1,200 a month, or it could be $499. I'm signing up for the $499. I don't care if I have to give up my private data and leave the. I mean, I'm being ridiculous, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know if it's going to be as hard this time. I just think that we need our OEMs to really step up, don't you, to be partners, because at this point, we've just gone too far when it comes to over-contenting cars and pricing. Meanwhile, you said the Tesla, that kids love Tesla, and Tesla controls almost all of their circumstances aside from some production in China, but they got their own gigafactory, right? They have at least 6 or 7 streams of revenue, right? They get energy credits. They get charging billions of dollars, $4 billion a year from the government for battery credits. They have every OEM, or not every, many OEMs paying them for carbon credits who can't hit their CAFE numbers. That's another few $billion. They have insurance. They got financing. They have all of these revenue streams that the traditionals don't have. And we've seen they can bring down the price of their cars, and they can create affordability like that. Guess what? Yes. Guess no matter how much people want to talk, Jarrod, about other manufacturers starting to take away market share from Tesla, they have 2 models, the 2 top selling models out there that collectively I think is 45% of the EV sales in America. The next closest one I think is at 3.5 to 5%. And I think there's only 2 of them over 3%. So what are the traditionals, the OEMs, for all of the dealers out there that's not Tesla? I mean, Toyota's, I was going to ask you, one of my speed round questions was, which non-direct consumer OEM do you think is best positioned for 2025 and beyond? I mean, obviously I would think Toyota's got to be top of the list, right?
Toyota's there. And then the other one, and this may be a shocker for you, the other one that I've been really watching and paying really close attention to is Volkswagen.
Interesting.
Look at, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's that new Volkswagen Buzz, that their EV van that they just dropped out there. I was blown away. I thought the thing was cool as hell. And I'm a guy who drives a 1-ton diesel. I was like, that's cool. That's different. Tell me more. But once again, there's something to it. It's attracting a different demographic, and it's also bringing that EV back mainstream too.
So I'm going to challenge you though. Can I do that?
Oh, of course, always. Okay.
So first of all, I don't think anybody has nailed an EV as much as they have with the ID Buzz. I think it's just an absolutely spectacularly looking retro car. I mean, when Dodge came out with the Challenger and Chevy with the Camaro, I thought they did a great job. These guys nailed it, especially when you combine stylistically the retro part of it with the tech. And I think that's a vehicle where kids are going to say, I could get behind that. But here's where I struggle. The U.S. CEO literally just abruptly stepped down, right, just days ago, and just 2 years into the role. They have troubles in China. They have troubles in Germany. They have strikes, people walking off the job. The workers are striking over VW's plan to cut jobs and to cut pay. They have, they just have a myriad of issues going on. I think from a product standpoint, I'm with you, but the company part of it just seems to be completely out of sorts at the moment. And I think it really depends, as it always does, on leadership.
Absolutely. Leadership, but also it's the consumer sentiment. That's the thing that I really am looking at too. The leadership's critical, but if the consumers start gravitating towards the brand, Audi's another one, and Porsche, all collective under that Volkswagen, umbrella, they start regaining that trust from the consumers that they've lost over the years. If they start recapturing this with some of the cool tech, as well as some of the cool new retro cars they're coming out with, I think, in my opinion, they're leveraging themselves for a situation where the disruptions and everything going on from a corporate environment can become almost numb because the consumer demand and consumer sentiment is so high. I think for the dealers themselves, it could really help levitate them, for the dealers to push the OEM to, hey, get your stuff together. We got customers coming out of the woodwork and you can't execute. That's a whole different problem and equation. But I think they are really hitting a consumer sentiment and segment, not only with this, but other vehicles they're producing, to really lean in and gear up. Maybe not for 25, but for 26, for 27, they're resetting the track now.
If you're asking me to take a bet with them going head to head with Buick or Jaguar, I'm all in, my friend. I'm all in. I agree. So let's jump over back to the dealer side of the fence. I was going to ask you a question, but I'm going to save it.
For round three?
Yeah. I got to save it just because it's OEM, and I really want to get back to dealership side. So let's revisit this tech stack issue or item, where we're getting to a point to where it's just becoming untenable for many stores. It's hard to get the adoption they want, much less the addiction, if they have too many products that seem to be disparate in nature. They don't have the utilization they want. They're not getting the ROI they're looking for, not necessarily because the product is terrible or even bad. It may be a great product, but a great product that is unused does not create a great outcome. So, one of the things I'm thinking about for 2025 is, I don't care what market you're in, and I don't care what franchise you have. Okay, your job is to be as competitive as you can and put you and your team in the best position possible to dominate. Agreed?
100%.
Okay, so if we were a sports team, whether it's basketball, football, or any other team, that's going to be based on a couple things. Number one is leadership, the coaching, right? Two, it's going to be a great plan. If it's in sports, it's a game plan. In business, it's a business plan, right? And we're going to have the right team. And if I'm going up against you and you have a far superior team on paper than I do, boy, I better have one mystical, magical game plan and perfect execution in order to win. Now, I don't know about you, Jarrod, but that has all the makings of a great Disney movie every 10 or 20 years. But it doesn't sound like a great blueprint for a business to hope and pray that we have that magical Disney moment. We want to be in the best position possible every day, every week, every month, every year, no matter what external circumstances. Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
You may be able to win that one game, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to survive and win the championship.
That's right. So the team, imagine this, the team is the tech stack. The team, you touch tech and you touch marketing. So if somebody happens to have a very unique situation like yours, to where you have this extraordinary level of experience and acumen with that intersects between marketing and tech, if you have that, it gives you a lot more flexibility to do things. In other words, you could almost, some people will buy apps or buy solutions. Others will have the bandwidth to create their own, maybe like some of the big publics, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So think in those terms. If you're going to build a tech stack today for the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years to future-proof your store, what DMS are you picking?
We just did it. It's Techion.
Okay, tell me why.
They have, and we looked at all of them, and we called everybody in and we looked at it. They are giving the functionality for dealerships, not only for the now, what we need to do, but also for what are the obstacles we could face down the road. They're giving it for our aligning to our vision of becoming, paperless transaction, digital transactions, really listening to the consumer sentiment of how they want to buy a car and how simple they want it. Techion really with their infrastructure aligns that very easily. But also at the end of the day, their evolution, because I started looking at them 2.5 years ago.
I remember when we were talking.
Been watching them. Yeah, 2.5 years ago we were talking. I have watched how far they've evolved in a short 2.5 years. I looked at the other ones we were considering. How have they evolved in 2.5 years? And a lot of them have not. If anything, they've regressed, or they've added this new piece or that new piece, or they bought this company, but this doesn't tie into this. And it's very confusing for the end user. It's trying to take a fourth grade basketball team and teach them how to throw alley-oops and shoot threes. Get them down to the basic blocking, tackling, and shooting free throws, and then you can grow upon that, which Techion's done a great job at. In the beginning, it was pretty basic, as you know, but now it's really dialed in for the future growth, which they are set up for success.
It's pretty mind-blowing. I'm excited, fortunate enough to spend time in Techion's booth, doing some podcast interviews during NADA. I'll be doing that again this year. And I'm always thankful to Jay and Guru, Mary Lou, who oversees all that, and the team for allowing me to record my podcast in there and have the opportunity to interview Jay. So undoubtedly, they're going to have some huge announcements this year. They have the last few years, and God only knows where it's going to be. I know AI is, they're big into, generational AI, right? Not just large language models. A lot of people are out there doing cool things with ChatGPT 4, but they're all using kind of the same platform, whereas Techion has their own, which is impressive. And I do like the fact that they disrupt themselves. They are constantly, as soon as they put something out in the market, they're looking for how to make it better, or how would we disrupt this product if we were a competitor. I think that's a very admirable trait.
And the one thing on that one, David, that they do a great job at, just in initial onboarding of stores, but also with the current stores we've had on platform, the reason why they are getting better is because they're listening. They are probably some of the best. That's why I was going to mention the sentiment monitor they have is crazy. And it was generative AI I was thinking of, not generational. It's generational to me. Everything's generational to me. But generative AI. But yeah, I saw something to where, and I had even asked Jay fairly recently, and I was astounded. These are massive, massive numbers of people that are giving them their feedback in real time on a daily basis, whether they're support, whether it's their first week on the job, whether they're the dealer, and they listen to all of it. He listens literally to all of it. So they monitor that. That's extraordinary, and it's something I haven't really seen in our industry before. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the beauty. So that gives them the ability to identify issues, identify opportunities, and pivot and adjust very quickly and make decisions on the fly to, hey, we're having an issue with reporting. Okay, great. What is it? Boom, boom, boom. Here's 3 or 4 things. Next thing you know is they're launching a new reporting suite that includes a lot of the things that dealers were asking for, but then also it's enhanced it even further to have a, ask Jeeves type of mentality of, hey, what's my data on this? Similar to like, we go back to reverse risk, similar to that, being able to have a chat bot say, hey, what did I sell in January 2022 for used cars? What was my average days of sale?
They have that.
I know, but that's something that we had talked about
crazy.
A year ago.
They have that. Hey, what do we do in service sales? Like, yeah, they have that. I don't even have to type it. I could just ask it. It's crazy, right? I could be talking to you as a client, and one of the things they shared last year, I think it was Concierge Pro. I think that was the name of it. Excuse me if I janked it up, but screwed it up. But they have something called Sales Concierge Pro, I think it is, where I could have you on the phone. I could instantly move the call from here onto my phone. I could take you to the showroom. I could walk you outside. I could show you a car. You could ask me a question about F&I. I can hit a button, bring my F&I manager into the conversation in real time, pop them back out after they answer. I mean, you talk about the future. They have the future. Like the future is like right now. So I get that. All right. So what about when it comes to used car acquisition?
I think it's really
you're using AccuTrade. You had mentioned to me last time we talked, right?
Yep.
So what is it that you love about AccuTrade? I consider AccuTrade the single most powerful acquisition tool or weapon out there in the marketplace. Everybody's trying every single way possible to acquire cars. But what I've learned and what I keep sharing and teaching people is if you want to sell more, you've got to appraise more, period. And you got to have something that allows you to appraise not just the people that buy cars, but the write-ups that don't, the unseens, the internet leads, the phone calls, the customer pay, the warranty. Because if you get to the point, once you get to the point, AccuTrade dealers are doing this, once you get to the point where you're appraising 50, 60, 70% of your service clients, your write-ups, your walk-ins, your internet, you're going to have more cars than you know what to do with. And you know what? You could cherry pick, keep the right cars, the ideal inventory. Like Danny always says at VinQ, you could keep that ideal inventory and then you could wholesale the rest and make some money that goes right to the bottom line. So why do you in particular see, what is it you see in AccuTrade? What do you love about AccuTrade?
It's the process nucleus at the end of the day. You're able to utilize that just like you would your DMS. You can use that as the nucleus for your appraisal structure. Every single one goes through there. I actually was on stage with Danny and Joe Oliveri at an event here in Florida a couple weeks ago when we were talking about this. And it's really those silo segments, and that's where used car acquisition has to be, is you have a trade segment. Perfect. Who's doing those appraisals? What's that process? You have the same thing for inbound opportunities for people who just want to sell their car. Or if you're marketing to people who have bought but haven't been for serviced and you're just trying to get them to do an appraisal, that's its own individual silo who's scraping Facebook Marketplace and things like that to just buy cars. Then you have a whole different silo for your service drive acquisition. So all three of those are siloed. And inside of AccuTrade, you can build that team and measure that team to those individualized instances and set KPIs to those. And there's one dashboard to be able to inspect what you expect and simplify from a coaching dashboard that's easy to digest from an owner standpoint all the way down to that end user standpoint of exactly how they're doing and what they're doing. But it's a complicated process. But at the end of the day, it's a very simple execution. So
complicated process to do it. You're saying AccuTrade simplifies it.
Correct.
So one of the things I'll say two things I really love about that, because I'm 100% confident. I've got the data to back it that if you want to sell more, you simply have to appraise more. And there is no other tool in the market that can allow me to provide a fast, seamless, transparent, fair appraisal the way CarMax or Carvana does, other than AccuTrade. AccuTrade can deliver that. AccuTrade can allow me to go from 30 minutes per appraisal down to 5 to 10 minutes. AccuTrade can allow me to send a text message. I talk to a lot of my clients that have it. They simply send a text message out, like Joe Blanco, over at Sheehy. They send a text message out to internet leads. That allows the customer to click on the link. They do the same process as they have on Carvana and CarMax, and they can get that fast, fair appraisal. So they're in the game all the time. So one thing is that speed and the simplicity, as you mentioned. So I think that's critically important. The other thing is that I've got clients who have basically calibrated AccuTrade to match up with CarMax in their market. And so once they've calibrated to that, they could see every appraisal, and if they see anybody hitting their cars, appraising them for $1,000, $2,000 less, they know somebody's being overly aggressive, and that's why you're missing out on those acquisitions. And if somebody's going over, maybe the car was unique and rare, and it makes a lot of sense, but it just makes it, to your point, so simple to have that dashboard and to be able to see truly what kind of job you're doing. But the bottom line is, would you look at people like Rob Ruth selling 300 plus cars in a town of 2,000, and you see people like the Sheehy Auto Organization, and others that are using it. It's just, obviously Tony Lucas and your team down there. It's really mind-boggling. It seems unimaginable, Jarrod, to people who aren't using it, but it's only unimaginable to them because they don't have that tool.
Well, it's not just the tool. The tool, it makes it easy. The hard part is the people and process. That's the hard part. It's the people and the process to implement into your existing trade process.
100%.
One thing when I got to Casa, they had this OTC appraisal thing where it's, they used to just give a range and get phone number, get a VIN number, get some photos, and they would just throw a number or a range at a car. And now that process is so much simpler because the consumer is not waiting on us to get this information, to load it to Viato, to go pull it, to get a used car manager, put a number on it, to then us call them back and say, hey, your car is worth $7,000 and this customer wants 12. Now I'm the bad guy. I can't come back from that at that point. They're not in front of me. Right. I can't overcome it. AccuTrade sits in the middle. They're the bad guy. I can come save the day.
That's a great point.
So that's the piece of that
you
process.
Show them that's the number on AccuTrade. You're right. That's a really great point. I got to ask you, so to me, that's definitely the undisputed champion there, and I could see why dealers around the country lean on it for that reason, to allow them to compete effectively and win against CarMax and Carvana.
And bolt AI onto that, David, and it becomes a whole different animal.
I totally agree with you. What else, as you go into 2025, New Orleans, walking to that convention center, is there anything else that you're interested in looking at, or you're curious about, or you think has the potential to be game-changing like that?
So the AI side of it and integrating that into AccuTrade is one. So working with the team over at Dealer Funnel and AccuTrade of application for service acquisition inside a Dealer Funnel from a component that's automated. You mentioned Sheehy. I know they send it out. You don't even have to have a user send it. It's 100% of the time, every time happening. It becomes the process at that point. So I'm excited about them and future integrations. And the second one is Rocket. And I know we've talked about that last time we were on too. I'm really excited to launch them because I think that is the overarching element that ties everything we talked about today back to that common center ground, is the training and the ability to have all of our staff understand exactly our expectations through our onboarding manual that we're building inside of there from a process, but also supporting this new sales rep or service advisor or manager with all the tools from some of the smartest minds in automotive to teach them basics about how to become a better leader, how to become a manager, how to pencil a lease, how to sit there and overcome lease objections. All of that is right there at their fingertips that we can then deploy to this team. So if somebody's struggling or somebody asks for help, I can help them for 5 minutes, but then I can go deploy a follow-up sequence to that quick 5-minute conversation of 10 minutes of Rockhead training around these silos, and knowing those silos align with who we are as a company, as a brand, and the direction we're going towards. And that kind of brings everything all in, which to me is extremely exciting.
You know, I met Marco Schnabel 100 years ago, and back when he was just starting Automotive Mastermind, we met at the Gansevoort Park hotel in the lobby and hung out, and we talked a little bit. And he asked me some questions. I gave him some feedback and suggestions back then. And needless to say, he's just an absolutely brilliant guy, and did a phenomenal job in growing that company. Sold it to IHS and started Rockhead. And I think that he's hit the nail on the head again. I think this is one of those things that I don't know if it's going to get as much play as it should. I don't think it will at NADA, because people tend to chase the silver bullets. I always see the silver bullet seekers on those red carpets, and they typically are going to go to things of digital marketing and social media and things like that, which are, don't get me wrong, super important. But, reverse risk was a massively important product that's now used by, I think, nearly 5,000 dealers that would not dream of operating a store without it. And we got very little play at NADA because it wasn't exciting. It was a utility. It's a shame that training and developing, recruiting, training, developing, keeping people isn't the most exciting thing to talk about in a dealership in 2024. I certainly hope it becomes that in 2025. And if that is important to you, you're tired of turning over people, you're tired of not having great processes, you're tired of people not adopting the right approaches. I don't know how you get there without a Rockhead. I really don't. I mean, I guess you could hire a trainer. I've seen people try that. But the difference with Rockhead is it's mobile. It's right here, right now.
It's accountability.
Is it's total accountability. It's measurable. It's quantifiable. And when they let me try it out a number of months ago, when you're looking at training that lasts 2 minutes, hey, guys, all of our salespeople, all of our people, we're built for 2-minute training, 3-minute training, because we're looking for the next thing. We're waiting for the next up. We're waiting for an appointment. We're waiting for a delivery. So it's just made for the way that our brains work. And so I'm excited about what he and the team over at Rockhead is building. And I'm definitely going to spend time with them during NADA. I like that you called one out. By the way, here's one I want you to drop in, Interactive EQ. Napo Rumteen, here's an interesting connection. Napo, who is Jay's right-hand guy for years at Techion. Prior to that, he was one of Marco's right-hand guys at Mastermind. Go figure. That guy, you think that guy might have a few ideas? Mm. Well, he came up with something I think is beyond brilliant and is going to have the opportunity again to change the game, because he's developed the first process that allows you to be able to measure EQ, right? And people talk all the time these days about Will Guidara's book, Unreasonable Hospitality. When you could combine, incredible hospitality, unreasonable hospitality with great tech and processes, you are going to create the greatest dealership in the world. Well, Napo has created Interactive EQ, which allows you to be able to discover and assess whether certain people have that superpower or not. And those are the people that are always self-driven. Those are the people that hate to lose. Those are the people that you don't have to babysit, ask them to put things in the CRM. They're driven to do things the right way. They're driven to want to make you look good. They're driven to want to help their team. Could you imagine a whole dealership filled with those people? You talk about a superpower. So I'm actually excited to see them as well, and a few others. I think, I don't know if you've heard of Expel out of San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. Yep, remarkable. I've looked at them.
Everybody's margins in the new car are shrinking. Expel dealers' margins are going the other way. How? Because they're able to go from selling a commodity, whatever your brand, your models are. Everybody has the same websites, on the same cars for the same programs. But these Expel stores, and I visited one in the Northeast Keeler. And they've literally, in their new dealership, actually built a section for XPEL because the margin is so phenomenal on the product. It allows their customers to differentiate their cars. The dealership differentiates. And they put these, and I was talking to Chris Martinez also at a Mercedes store. Every car has got the clear bra or the clear door edge guards that helps them to expand those shrinking new car margins. So there's some really interesting things that's out there, both on the what I would consider leading edge of tech, like you said, AI, Jarrod, but others that people may not consider leading edge of tech. But nonetheless, when you look at companies like XPEL, you look at companies like Rocked, and some of these other companies out there, they have the power, interactive EQ, to completely transform a dealership, and that's kind of cool.
And it's a simple one. I just actually sat with one, last week. Somebody wanted to, of course, Thanksgiving. I was like, I'm, busy, but Black Friday, I sat there and gave them, 20 minutes of my time. It's a company that had studied all of the Texas Auto Dealer Association bylaws for marketing and advertising.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Well,
Compliance.
So they built it as a compliance, but they added an AI twist to it. So I can now say, here's my ad copy. Is this compliant? Here is my image. Is this image meet qualifications for compliancy with TADA? So it's tools like that maybe we don't need to bolt
Same
onto
thing.
it.
Sounds boring to some people. To me, it sounds like a home run.
But you don't need to bolt it onto your DMS. It's a tool, and it's not going to be an expensive tool. I think it was $250 a month they were asking for it, and you can literally just run all your ad copy and your ad text through it to make sure you're 100% compliant with TADA regulation. And I'm like, that's so simple, but it's so efficient. So yeah, NADA this year is going to be exciting. And I think we just discovered what our third one of these is going to have to be here in January to talk about what is the plan for NADA.
Well, I think what we can do is I'm going to put it out on LinkedIn. You should do the same. What tools would you like to have reviews? What things are you thinking about going to see? And we'll take a sneak peek at them and give people a preview so they can get an idea of which each of those tools are, what they can do, what the promise is, how they can help their store, and so they could get set up and hopefully save time, because nobody has time to crawl around that red carpet. I mean, it's just massive. So super important to be efficient with your time. And speaking of which, we are at the top of our hour. Maybe even we bled a little over, Jarrod. So I appreciate you taking the time for that. So many things to recap. If somebody wants to go to davidspisak.com, if you go there, we'll give you show notes that give you a recap on everything that Jarrod touched on. If you want to get in touch with Jarrod, you could find him on LinkedIn, but I'll also give you a couple other ways to connect with him in the show notes. If you go to davidspisak.com, and most importantly, Jarrod, I want to thank you for your time, for your insights, for your perspectives. And I could just pick your brain all day long, but I know that we both have things to do. So we got to get back to work. We got to make December happen.
It's my pleasure
to stay connected with you. And let's just plan on maybe that the week before NADA, we'll get something put together. So anybody that's listening to this, please send in what you'd like us to take a look at. Between Jarrod and I, maybe we'll even get somebody else to join the party here, and we'll start. We're not going to dissect them. We're not going to tell you to buy it or not buy it. We're just going to tell you what it is, what it does, and if it has some transformative capabilities for your store. So with that, Jarrod, thank you. Appreciate it. Glad you had a great Thanksgiving holiday. Wishing you and your family all the best for a very happy holiday season. Stay in touch, and look forward to seeing you again in January.
My pleasure. Have a great December, David, and thank you for everything you do for us in the industry, and happy holidays.
I'm so happy to do it. It's completely my pleasure. For everybody who took the time to join, thank you for taking the time to join to this extended length version interview with Jarrod Kilway. Hope you enjoyed it. And as always, please take the time to share it if somebody you think could benefit from it. Download it and subscribe. And as always, I would love your reviews. Look forward to seeing you next time on the David Spisak Show. Thanks so much.